Hey folks, what's up? Evan here from Stock Music Musician, and in this video I have an overview of all of the samplers that are included with Reason. There's a bunch. I haven't even actually bothered to count how many, although I've laid them all out here. Probably 8 or 9 different samplers you can use in Reason, and they're all a little different. They all have their pluses and minuses. They all should be used in certain situations and avoided in others. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through each of these different samplers in Reason, offer you some examples of what they might be best at, kind of show you a little bit of an overview of their workflow. I'm going to just kind of give my thoughts and feelings on each of them. If you're overwhelmed or confused, though, about Reason and all of the tools and possibilities, effects, utilities, devices, instruments that are included in it, don't worry, I got you covered. I've got a link to a free Reason cheat sheet that describes all of the main devices in Reason, so you can quickly at a glance look at it and say, all right, what do I need? What should I use here? So click that link down below to use it, and now let's start jumping into the different samplers in Reason. So the first sampler is maybe not really a sampler, but it can be used to chop samples, and that is Dr. OctoRex. By default, Dr. OctoRex is kind of a loop player. You hit run, and it plays a loop, which is pretty cool. It can only play Rex files. It does not play WAV files, but there's a lot of really nice Rex files, and you can also make your own. I've done a whole video on how to make your own Rex loops. Just search for that on YouTube if you want it. But what makes Rex cool as a sampler is if you have a Rex loop that you've either purchased or made yourself, you can actually select the different slices and like chop the samples on your own. So here we've got the loop, right? Just a drum loop. But I'm now going to play the keys on my keyboard down here that correspond to each of these slices. So it can be really fun to use that either to do vocal chops, drum chops, whatever. This is a great sampler for also doing kind of lo-fi wobbly things. If you start using the oscillator to pitch or mapping velocity to the filter, it's really straightforward, fast, it's lightweight. So if we pull up the filter, for example, as I hit, you can do all sorts of fun stuff with it. I would definitely recommend this for chopping samples. It is probably best as a loop player, especially now that Mimic has been added to Reason. So if you have Reason 12 and you have Mimic, I would use Mimic to chop samples instead, because you can adjust where the slice points are on the fly, and you can do it for WAV files, whereas Rex is only Dr. Rex files. Moving to the next sampler, this is probably one of the simplest and most straightforward. You've got the ReDrum, the classic. And basically with ReDrum, it works best as an old school simple drum sequencer where you've got 10 different samples arrayed left to right. You've got a simple step sequencer, 10 channels, and some limited abilities to tweak the samples. So let's just quickly punch in a drum beat here. 4 on the floor, boom, with a little bit of clap. And you can click here to preview any of the sounds. So if we just hit run, yeah, we're in the club. So that's it at its simplest, but you've got special mapping on each of these, so you can control the pitch of most of the drums, but then on some of them, you can choose the amount of bend that's going to the pitch, which kind of can create more of like you can do a lot of different things, but like maybe an 808, boom, that sort of thing. You've also got the ability to control certain parameters with velocity, for example, tone via velocity, so hard hits will sound different than soft hits, or the sample start time with velocity. These are all types of tweaks that are much more suited to drums than they are to other instruments, and that's why it's a great place to start for straightforward drum beats, if that's what you're into. If you're doing any old school stuff, you got it. You got the basics here. You can also just control this with a MIDI programmer. You know, you can go into the sequencer do what you want, or use a utility, or again, I can use my keyboard if I select the right channel. So it's really great for all of that stuff. You've also, like, we could change the tone of it if we wanted. So tone, velocity to tone. Or just the pitch of the kick. Really good for drums, especially simple stuff. Turning to the next venerable drum sampler, I guess, in Reason, you have Kong. And Kong actually has two different samplers in it. It also has some drum machines. But basically, it's got a simple version of the NNXT called the NN Nano, which we'll get to in a second. And it also can do some kind of a version of the Rex loop player called the Nurse Rex, and you can chop just like you would in the regular version of Rex. So I'm not going to get into detail about the way either the NN Nano works or the Nurse Rex. The point is more to say that this is a really good sampler. I like to use it for both having like a lot of different instruments on different channels, or triggered, you know, like one shots, I guess is the better way of describing it. Sampled one shots. You can get 16 on, you know, one device and pull them out. You can also use it for drum chops. You know, you could have your entire 16 hits from a drum loop mapped to each pad, or you could just have, you know, the kick, snare, whatever. And if this is a format that makes more sense to you, that's great. There are also some really cool built-in features on the Kong. For example, the ability to alternate hit types, to link multiple drums to each other. So like if you wanted to layer your kick, you could say kick bass 1 and kick 2 are both in group D, and when I hit 1, now the other will hit. Or you could alternately have it so that it alternates between two sounds when one is hit. So now I'm going to map both of these kicks to alt group G. So even though I'm only hitting one, it's alternating between the two. Can be great for snares, hi-hats, all sorts of things. The limit is your imagination. Or muting something. So like if when one instrument hits, you wouldn't want the other one to hit, you know, because it wouldn't be natural. Like let's say you've got an open hi-hat and a closed hi-hat. There's no way in the real world that a tail of an open hi-hat would bleed into a tail of a closed hi-hat, because it's closed hi-hats, the hi-hat's been closed and then it's being hit. So you can do like choke groups and things like that. You can also have multiple layers of instruments. Kong has some really cool built-in effects that you won't find elsewhere in Reason. The resonator, the rattler, the ring modulator, the transient shaper, all these tools are special, unique, and a little different from what else you find in Reason. Now you can route into the back of the jack of Kong. I've made a video called the Reason's Hidden Effects. So if you want to figure out how to do that, check out that video. But it's usually just simpler to put it right in the Kong as a sample and control it from there. You also have some bus effects that you can put on all of the samples, and same with the master compressor, or master effects, sorry. So the Kong, great for one-shots, great for drums, any genre really. I was going to say hip-hop, but really for anything. Moving to the next sampler, we've got my favorite sampler in Reason, which is Mimic. It's the new one added with Reason 12. I've done a whole like 30-minute tutorial on Mimic. It's super in-depth, so I'm not going to get into how to use it. But the two things that make Mimic cool are, one, you can use it in slice mode. That's selected. I got to remember to keep doing that. So we're playing each little bit of this bell sound. And we can adjust these points here. Let's move this back. You're not going to hear anything too interesting with this sample, but it can be really helpful if you want to chop stuff on the fly. It's super powerful. You also have the ability to just do kind of a regular pitch-based sampler. Sounds really good. But you have many different modes. So by default, and what we're going to see in the next few samplers is that traditionally with a sampler, if you move the pitch of a sample, it speeds it up or slows it down. But with these other modes here, it doesn't do that. It keeps the sample at the same speed and only adjusts the pitch. So it's really, I would say this is the first sampler that I would reach for most of the time in Reason in 2022, now that Mimic is out. It's fast, the workflow is good, you've got a lot of great built-in options with the filter, the amp, built-in really good compressor, really characterful compressor, and some great effects. You've got pretty much everything you need in here to do fun stuff. Full-featured sampler that came with Reason. This is basically allows you to map different samples to different key ranges so that you can have a more natural sound. You can control it in all sorts of ways, from the pitch to the envelope to filters, all the stuff you'd expect. This is a simple, straightforward sampler. There's a lot of great patches for it. To be honest, in 2022, if you're on Reason 12, aside from using the patches, I don't see that much reason to use NN19 or to bother to learn how to do it. I'd stick to Mimic and NNXT, which are kind of more advanced. Well, Mimic's sort of simpler and sort of more advanced. NNXT is more advanced, but I think more powerful. And I don't really get the use case for the NN19 in Reason 12. But if you think otherwise, please do let me know below. But if I want to do one-shots, I'm using Kong. If I want to do basic sampling, I'm probably using Mimic. And if I want to do more advanced layers, I'd probably just use the NNXT. But prove me wrong. Leave a comment about how you like to use NN19 in Reason 12. So we'll kind of just move past that really quick. Next up, we have NNXT, which is the most complicated sampler in Reason, the most powerful. And basically what it lets you do is assign samples per note. You notice you got a keyboard here, and then you get to choose the range of how much that instrument, or how many notes that sample covers. I will never remember to click on that. So you've got a bunch of other options once you've mapped it. For example, the sample start and end points, what happens at the end, how it loops, the range, if it fades in, fades out. You can control all sorts of parameters, just like we've talked about. The one shortcoming of this compared to some other more advanced samplers by third parties that aren't included with Reason is just it's a little cumbersome now, because it still is kind of all per slice. The global stuff I find isn't global enough, and so if you want to make everything kind of work, you just gotta be doing a lot of work down in the trenches, whereas something like Contact works a little better in my view. This could definitely use a cleanup, but it is a very powerful tool for making your own complex instruments and mapping them across a keyboard. Next up, we have Hybrid Scenic, and I believe this is not part of the core version of Reason. This was included with Reason Suite and is part of Reason Plus. Basically, it lets you do cinematic instruments. We'll just start with a wistful harp here. You'd almost think this was a running joke, but I am just that out of it today. So it's sort of a cinematic instrument device. And it basically works by having two different samples, one on the left, one on the right, doing some granular synthesis to it, which we'll learn about in the next sampler, and then blending the two together and allowing you to kind of adjust the various macro parameters, based on the patch. It's kind of like a combinator in that way. But you can add in your own samples instead. So if we hit edit and we click either on engine A or engine B, you'll see right here you've got the sample and the sample engine. And so if we were to just go to like, I don't know, let's go to loop supply. Now those are all going to be drums. We'll go to factory sounds and we will go to NXT sampler patches, sure. We'll just drag that on there. And if we were to blend it all here, but we're actually on engine B. We have to go to user sample and enable it. Let's change the start position. You'll notice it's tuned down to -21, so let's bring this up. If you don't have nice speakers, you're probably not hearing that. And it's using granular synthesis to just make this really cool sound. And sustaining it. Now if we were to blend the two together, this tool is really great for creating your own like pads and atmospheres, doing weird stuff that you wouldn't expect. It's a lot of fun to use. It is sort of, I mean, I'm not an expert at it. It's somewhat unpredictable to me in a good way. Creative, fun. I like it a lot. This isn't what I'd use to chop samples, not at all. Never. But for textures, for cinematic music, this is a really cool and fun instrument. And just, like I said, fun to play with. Next up, we have Grain. Grain, I have done a full in-depth video tutorial on as well. If you really want to know how to use it in all of its modes, please just search for that. They are all also going to be in a playlist. This should be one playlist all about sampling in Reason, so you can check out any of those videos. So this is a granular synthesizer. What's a granular synthesizer? Basically, it takes a sample, chops it up into a little bunch of bits, and doesn't play them all straightforward or backwards. It can jitter around them. It can cut them short, do a bunch of fun stuff. And so this is not straightforward sampling, but this is really a textural, characterful manipulation of sound. And you've got, it also has a synthesizer under the hood, but let's just drop in our own sample. You hear how much that changes it? And how great that sounds? Never would have expected that. And if we were instead to drop in, we're in the bass section. Who would have thought a bass would sound like that? But let's actually drop a pad in there. Pads on pads. Jitter. Totally fun and unpredictable. I love that sound. And basically, you can add your own. You can do a ton with this. I'm not even going to try and touch the surface. If you want to know how to use Grain, watch that video. It's like 30 minutes long. It gets into it a lot. But the main long and short of it is you can do just about any sound in Grain, from leads to bass to like glitchy drums, but they all have a lot of texture. And so this isn't like clean sampling. It's more like found sounds, but hyper usable, and definitely an instrument worth learning how to use. Finally, we're coming to the kind of Umpf series. There's at least 2 drum kits. There's the club drums and there's like the retro drums, which come with Reason Plus, and there might be one more, but they all are essentially the same thing. You got 8 samples here. You can drop them in here and change whatever samples you want. You've got individual effects per group, and then a bunch of bus effects from reverb, delay, and this cool chopping feature. And these, I mean, this is honestly probably my go-to drum Umpf, both of the two Umpfs, relatively speaking, my go-to drum samplers in Reason right now. They're a lot of fun to use. They have most of the built-in effects I'd want when I'm like getting my raw drum sound. And so I'll just drop in, the samples I want, and then build out my drum kit, hit tab to create individual channels, but we'll run some through these buses, maybe not. But use the onboard like bit crusher, or distortion or envelope filters. And, it's really makes it easy to get clean and good drum sounds. So there you have it. I hope you found this super helpful. I know this was a lot. If this is overwhelming, be sure to download that cheat sheet for how, to use all of Reason's devices. And also be sure to check out the rest of this playlist with all the information about how to use these samplers in depth. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.